On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
Today we're playing a game of Devonshire Villages. That's when you get books, open them up and put them on your head to emulate the roofs of buildings, and then you pretend to be a Devonshire village. I'm the quaint old pub. I am the oldie worldy church. And I are the village shop. We are a Devonshire village.
I don't know about you, but I think that should be made a real Olympic sport.
I really like the old credits.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and on every Saturday afternoon I come out and give you a load of blurb about hard science, weird shit and a smattering of sorry alchemy. Why? It's what I do, isn't it? I've been the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology for 30 years now, and I have no intention of stopping anytime soon. And so, every Saturday afternoon and every Wednesday evening, for the foreseeable future at least, you'll have us doing strange things. But what we're going to talk about first, and it seems oddly prescient considering the political situation as we speak, we're going to talk about lake monsters in Russia. So, Richard, what is it that fascinates you most about these lake monsters in the wilds of Siberia?
The propensity for them to attack and kill people, which you seldom get anywhere else. Over the past 14, 15 years or so, 19 people have been killed and eaten by something in Lake Chaniy in southern Siberia, which is a relatively shallow lake. It's very large, 53 miles long, 50 miles wide, but it's shallow. And there are villages around it, and people say that there is an animal in the lake which they describe as being serpentine and about 30 feet long. They say it rams boats, flips them over, grabs people, kills them and eats them. In one case, a fisherman was out on the lake with his friend angling, and the creature rammed the boat. He and his friend fell into the water. The monster grabbed one of them and the other guy swam for shore thinking he was doomed, but he got to shore and turned around and the creature had made off with his friend and he was never seen again. In another case, an elderly couple were watching their grandson, a former soldier, fishing from a boat on the lake when the monster rammed the boat, knocked him into the water, grabbed him and swam away. And there have been a number of calls for an official government investigation into this, but they've just been given the brush off. The government line is people are getting drunk, falling in the water and drowning. That doesn't explain the sightings of the monster. It doesn't explain people seeing the monster grab people, and it doesn't explain chunks of masticated human flesh washing up on the shores of Lake Chaniy.
No, it's a weird one, isn't it? Wasn't there a famous Russian lake, I think it was in Siberia, that allegedly the creatures had been seen by a group of scientists who were there in the 60s?
There were two, Lake Labynkyr and Lake Vorota. In Labynkyr there's a tradition There's no settlements around there, but there's a tradition that the nomads have that the lake is inhabited by a devil, and they say that their dogs have chased deer into the lake, and this thing was reared up out of the lake and grabbed the deer. It's been seen rearing up and grabbing water birds, and it's also supposed to have flipped rafts and eaten people. And in one very old story, it was recorded in a book called Journey to the Cold Pole. Evenk people, they are. A child of about 7 years old was supposed to have been grabbed by one of these creatures at the edge of the lake and eaten. So the grandfather made a trap by baiting whatever this creature was with a reindeer hide filled with hot rocks that he'd heated up. And when it swallowed the bait, it was heard moaning and thrashing about, and in the morning they found it dead on the shore, and it was about 23 feet long, had a great wide mouth and 4 little limbs and a tail, which doesn't really sound like anything known to science. But the stream going into the lake is now known as the Stream of the Child. But in the 60s, Moscow University sent a group of people out there, a group of scientists to look at the lake, and they said they saw something out on the lake that reminded them of a great metal drum in shape when it came to the surface, and it had a shiny texture to it. The light was shining off its skin, suggesting it had smooth skin, and it had a tall dorsal fin. Lake Verota is about 12 miles away, and that the same group said that when they surveyed that lake, there was a dead tree sticking out into the water, and 2 of the members were on this dead tree, and they saw this disturbance in the water, in the bottom of the lake, because it was very clear where they were, and there were 2 like white points, and then they realised that these were eyes, and there was this immense fish with a huge wide mouth gradually getting closer and closer to them as if it was stalking them. So they beat a hasty retreat. But nobody's been back and had a look properly again. A few years ago, some scientists went to Lake Labynkyr and were measuring the depth with sonar, and it was immensely deep, and they also caught very anomalous sonar readings of it that seemed to be some huge animate creature. The lady that was leading these experiments was saying this isn't a shoal of fish, it isn't a clump of vegetation, it's some big animal down there, but she had no idea what it was. But I've been trying for ages to get TV companies interested in going and doing a documentary about these 3 lakes, particularly Lake Chaniy, because it's like the script to a horror film or a horror novel, and this monster killing people in a lake and the government ignoring it. But nobody seems to be interested. It would make a great documentary. I'd like to take a trip to Siberia and do all 3 of these lakes. We could set up buoys with bait on them and cameras. We could have underwater cameras.
May I just interject here? He means BUOYS, not small children with bait on them. Sorry to interrupt, Richard, but you know what people are like when they watch shows on the internet.
Some people mispronounce it buoys for some insane way. They're buoys, for God's sake. Yeah, you have a stationary buoy, a flotation device with a bag of bait beneath it, and if something comes and grabs the bait, pulls the buoy underwater, you know you've got a big animal in the lake. And we could set up camera traps. You could use underwater cameras in baited areas. You could even set things up before you were there, pay people to throw fish meal in a certain part of the lake to attract fish, which would then attract bigger predators.
V pointed out that in the 3 lakes the descriptions do differ, and it does appear that there is some unknown or just outsized specimens of a known species of a very, very large fish, as well as all the other reports which are of, I really have no idea what they're of. They sound like anything, like a sort of enormous carnivorous newt, but that's pretty ridiculous. So, Richard, more than one thing in those lakes?
Well, in Lake Chaniy, the things are reported as being serpentine, which makes them sound like eels. Now, eels are not known from Lake Chaniy, but eels can move across land. So it could be a gigantic eel, because they say it's snaky or serpentine. In Lake Lake Verota, they said it had this great wide mouth, this thing with a great white mouth that sounds like a huge catfish, far, far bigger than anything known to science. And then in Lake Labynkyr, you've got this pointed dorsal fin on the back, or it could have been a creature on its side waving about a pectoral fin. We don't know for sure. But at Lake Labynkyr, you've got the description from a long time ago of the Evenk grandfather that's supposed to have based and killed one, where he said it had this sort of almost a beak-like snout, and that sounds a bit like the front end of a sturgeon. Sturgeons have these pointy snouts, but the mouth is underneath on a sturgeon. They're bottom feeders. They have a fairly small mouth. They do grow massive. The biggest one was caught, I think, in 1828, 1827, something like that, on the Volga, and it was 23 feet long, which is the size of a big crocodile. So they have the size and they have the power, but as far as I know, sturgeon have never eaten anybody. They feed on mainly small animals off the bottom of the lake. Whether it would be physically able, one of that size, to swallow a human being is a different matter. So there is a whole cauldron of possibilities about what these things are, but we don't have enough information yet, and that's why really we need to get out to Siberia and look at these lakes.
V and I were talking about this last night, and although I will admit I was slightly in my cups, he gave a very interesting point that these things, the ones on the lake that are attacking boats and killing people, these things appear to have a level of deductive intelligence that one would be very unlikely to see in a fish.
Well, that's not necessarily true. There are Wells catfish in the rivers of France that watch for when pigeons come down and drink in the water, and they'll lunge out and grab them like crocodiles grabbing zebras in Africa, and they'll watch for when people feed the pigeons near water, and then grab them when they're close to the water's edge.
Oh, well, that's one piece of circumstantial evidence in favour of there being giant catfish in these lakes. I think also we should point out, just in case people get confused, that there's another lake in Siberia which had very well attested lake monster sightings, and even had scientists who drew pictures of what they'd seen, but recently it turned out to be a hoax, didn't it, Richard?
That one was a newspaper hoax. It goes back to the 1960s, and they'd drawn this dragon-like creature that they said they'd seen come out of the lake, and I can't remember the name of the lake now.
No, neither can I.
Yeah, but there's a dragon-like creature with a fin on its back. That was a newspaper hoax.
By the way, just after we'd finished filming the last piece, Richard and I almost simultaneously remembered that the lake where the newspaper hoax took place was Lake Khayir. But going back to the three lakes that we've been talking about, we have another question from V. He picked up on what I said about it looking like a giant carnivorous newt, and I said, well, that was a ridiculous idea, but V wanted to know, could it be possible? Could there be a giant member of the Salamandrinae, either a newt or a salamander?
There are giant salamanders. There's a Chinese and Japanese giant salamander. The Chinese grows to about 5 feet long. The Japanese goes to about 4.5 feet.
And to interrupt, one of the things that the CFZ had been predicting for years, the third species of Asian giant salamander, Sligo Salamander, has now been confirmed as being found in Guangdong province and possibly Hong Kong and South China. And all the people who told us that we were being stupid and that there couldn't possibly be such a thing, I've only got one thing to say to you. Nah, 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 nah. Sorry, Richard, back to giant salamanders.
Well, neither of them grow anything like the size to be a threat to a human being. They could give you a nasty bite, but they certainly couldn't swallow you. They're also mountain-dwelling creatures that live in fairly fast-flowing streams and rivers. So it's highly unlikely there will be a giant salamander in Siberian lakes.
The only times they're found in flat rivers, if I can use that term, is when they are the runoff from mountain streams and the water's hyperoxygenated, because the giant salamanders need more oxygen so they can breathe it through their skins than most animals would. No, I'm afraid I don't think that the idea of a giant salamander or a giant newt in any of these Siberian lakes, wonderful though it would be, and very tempting though it is to say, oh, wouldn't that be brilliant, but no, I don't think so. Anybody who saw On the Track Extra back on Wednesday will know that I gave a brief plug to this remarkable book. It is In Search of Real Monsters by Richard Freeman, part 2 of his series Adventures in Cryptozoology. It's not published by us, but showing what magnanimous, wonderful people we are. Over to Richard, because I want Richard. You're the author. Rather than me extrapolate stuff from here, tell me, what's the book all about, if you can leave the dog alone for a few minutes?
Well, the book, here we are. It's the second of a 2-volume work. When I was originally approached by Mango Books to write an introduction to cryptozoology for them, the manuscript I delivered them was too large, and they said they could either cut it down or break it into 2 volumes. So I went for the latter. And because of COVID, the second volume has been some time in coming out. It's a couple of years late. But it's basically the second half of the manuscript that I originally delivered to them. And in this secondary volume, we look at supposedly extinct creatures that may still be around. That's animals like the Tasmanian Wolf, which we see on the cover there, which is the logo of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and the cryptid I think most likely to exist, magnificent flesh-eating marsupial, supposedly extinct from the mid-30s, but there have been 4,000 sightings of it since then, so it's not got the memo. Tasmanian Wolf has been described as the healthiest extinct animal you're ever likely to meet, and I'm inclined to agree. I've been down to Tasmania 3 times now looking for it with Mike Williams and others. and I'm convinced completely of its continued existence. But we also look at things like the giant ground sloth in South America, which is very interesting, but the evidence is not as persuasive as it is for anything like as persuasive as it is for the thylacine. And things like supposed surviving dinosaurs like Mbembe and Amelanatoka in the Congo and other parts of tropical Africa, which in my opinion are not dinosaurs at all. They're a heterogeneous group of things that are being seen, including possibly very large semi-aquatic monitor lizards, very large pythons with the front part of the body rearing out of the water, looking somewhat like a dinosaur's neck, in the totally erroneous way that people think that they lived in water. Possibly huge soft-shell turtles, and with the case of Amelanatoka, the killer of elephants, which was a creature with a great horn, possibly an undiscovered species of rhino. African rhinos live on the plains, the grasslands, the savannah. There could be an undiscovered rhino that's a forest dweller living in Africa. And I also go on to talk about giant reptiles, crocodiles, anacondas, pythons that have grown much bigger than they should, than what the textbooks say that they should. I mean, there are two different things. There's what the so-called experts say and the boundaries they draw upon things, and then there's reality, which is something entirely different. These arbitrary maximum sizes that are given to animals, I think, are very foolish. Nobody can really agree on the maximum size of any given creature, and the biggest one that's been measured by an expert is not likely to be the biggest individual anyway. So I look at many cases of giant crocodiles and snakes, and then I go on to talk about my own experiences. For over 20 years now I've been going around the world hunting for all sorts of strange cryptids and beasts, and basically I give a travelogue of what happens on these expeditions. My time in the Gobi Desert, where I've been caught in sandstorms and twisters, and tracking the Tasmanian wolf through the wilds of Tasmania, getting heat stroke whilst looking for the giant anaconda in Guyana, falling off cliffs and down crevasses almost on the track of the Russian wild man, the Almasty, and many other things, the Yeti, lots of other creatures that I've searched for and in some cases came very close to seeing. So it's my travelogue and my personal experiences, and then finally I give a sort of from scratch account of the best way to set up an expedition, things you need to do, things you need to take, the preparations you need to make, everything to make a successful expedition. And the big key to that is finding good native guides. That's the main cornerstone of any expedition. And of course the best way to hunt mystery animals is to join the CFZ. So it's out now, In Search of Real Monsters, and you can get it online from Amazon and other places, and you can probably order it from most good bookshops and probably most crap bookshops as well. If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, wants me to remind you, always press the notification bell. Otherwise you won't be told when there's a new show to watch. And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it? And so, ladies and gentlemen, we're here at the end of another show. If you listen hard enough, you can probably hear Richard singing Disturbing Nonsense, the dog in the kitchen. But that is as may be. The dog has just come back. If you look on the right of your hand of your screen, you can see him trying to get into the bin, thinking I'm not noticing.
I notice everything, dog.
And so where was I? Here we are, at the end of another show. I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to show you a t-shirt that I was sent by one of our viewers. It is of Bigfoot drinking and looking like he is as pissed as a newt. But we were talking about giant newts earlier. This is what happens when a giant ape man gets as pissed as one. Thank you very much for my t-shirt. I'm very sorry that I can't say who it's from because I don't know. It just arrived in the post one day with a little parcel with a little sticker thing on it saying, "Hope you wear it in the show." And it didn't say who it's from. So please, if whoever my mystery benefactor is watching, please give me a shout, because I want to give you a shout out here on the show because I really like this shirt. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, apart from that, where are we? Well, the end of the show. Have I got any important parish news for you? Well, not really, but just remember, we'll be back on Wednesday at 5 o'clock with something else for you. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the something else is. Do you know why? Because I'm just about to have my supper, and then Richard and I are going to extemporise the something else afterwards. But I hope you enjoy it massively, and I hope you continue to support us, and I hope you continue to watch this show, because I'm always here watching it with V and Louis, and quite often Richard and Carl and other people as well. And so, if you're there watching us, and we're there watching you, I'll be... What is it, V? I'll be what?